evening and welcome to the Wednesday, April 17th, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. The first thing I'd like to do is have a moment of silence in honor of all the direct and indirect victims of the violence on Monday. Okay, first item on the agenda is minutes. Vote minutes of March 6th, 2013. Do I have anyone eager to make a motion? I see people shaking heads, so we will wait until next week. And I'll bet the same is true for the 13th.
I've read the minutes from the 13th.
Okay.
And I make a motion to accept them as recorded.
Okay. Thanks,
Second.
Tom.
In a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the minutes of March 13th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Okay, next item on the agenda is a continued enforcement issue for Ronald Bauer, trustee, 43 Gunning Point Road and Gunning Point Road, map 3706000000, Falmouth, for altering wetland resource area and in buffer to resource areas as defined in FWR 10.00 and 310 CMR 10.00. This is this enforcement involves a negotiation among at least 4 parties, and there's been numerous meetings since we last had a continuance, and I understand from the principals of all these parties that there's very close to an agreement, and so we're going to have a further continuance for 3 weeks, and hopefully in that 3 weeks we can come to a resolution on this issue that is satisfactory to everyone concerned. So what's 3 weeks from now?
Make a motion to continue this till May 8th.
Second.
Okay, any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table is a continuance for the enforcement issue till May 8th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Next, we have requests for determination of applicability. Westminster Land Company, Inc., 23 Zell Street, East Falmouth, for permission to repair the T section of the dock and last section of a timber walkway. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman. The dock was damaged in, I believe, Tropical Storm Sandy. We've been working with the applicant on a repair. So at this point, we're recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the agreement from the applicant that the side dock shall be reduced in length to conform with the approved plan. Because some of although the emergency regs are not in effect, one of the conditions of those regulations was that all of the docks have to conform to their licensed and approved plans. So the applicant is in the audience and he's been working with Mark on that, so that's our recommendation. It would be the -2 under the state and the bylaw.
So
Okay.
moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions on the board? Sir, do you know what a negative determination means?
I do.
Okay,
It's like accounting.
it's like accounting. All right, that's good, we can put that in. Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is a negative determination, which means Mr.
Engelstadt.
Okay, can go ahead with the project with the agreement with the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Next is,
Thank you.
thank you, John Dow, 27 Madeline Avenue, East Falmouth, for permission to pump, fill, and remove the existing cesspools and install a new Title V sewage disposal system.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the applicants are requesting a continuance until May 1st.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a continuance on the table to May 1st. A motion on the table to continue to May 1st. Are there any questions on the board? Are there any questions from the audience? Okay. All in favor of the motion on the table to continue to May 1st, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Okay, continued requests for a hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings at the Falmouth Conservation Commission are heard simultaneously under the authority of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Town of Falmouth Water Quality Management Committee, care of Steve Rafferty, Little Pond Estuary, and the west end of Narragansett Avenue, East Falmouth, for permission to access Little Pond at the west end of Narragansett Avenue, to cultivate oysters using floating bags, maximum 2,000 floating bags or 20 strings of 100 bags as part of a shellfish propagation demonstration project. This hearing was, we heard parts of it a couple of weeks ago. Subsequent to that, the abutters notifications went out, so we have to open up the hearing again, begin the hearing again from the beginning. And also subsequent to that, I've met with the committee or the subcommittee, I guess it is, and I'm assuming, and I know that they continued meetings and have done additional work since then. So I'm not sure. So all of us were on, except you weren't here for the first one.
No, I was not.
But I'm going to clarify again, because anytime we've done this in the past, if we're reopening, starting a hearing from the beginning, which
You reset.
apparently we are, we're resetting the quorum. Okay?
Thank you.
Steve?
We're glad to be back in front of you again. I think you did a good job of framing that we were here before. Out of that, we recognized some procedural issues and some technical issues. We hope to address all of that. We are going to re-go through the PowerPoint from before, but following along with the difference to make sure that there's 12 copies of everything. I'm passing out right now the PowerPoint that we will be talking to. I'm also passing out data that we just really got in the last few days, which is the baseline data for which SMAS.
Thank you.
How many more do you need?
2.
3, just for the fun of it?
No, I really
Okay.
don't.
Good. Anybody else want to send who we're talking to? There you go. Terrific.
Could we have a set for
I got
the
one.
record?
Here,
All
Beth.
right. Yeah.
You all good? You want another
Yeah.
one? Okay.
Okay, Steve?
Yes?
Before you begin, I want to reiterate that I appreciate all the work that your committee has done. This is a very complex project, and it affects everyone in Falmouth. And our job is to evaluate it from a regulatory point of view and hopefully help you make it the best possible project.
Absolutely. So just for the record, I am passing out some paperwork, and I'm going to tell you what it is, and why you have 12 copies. The first thing that you've got in the package, I just handed you, the very first top thing stapled up, is the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to run through. It's been modified a little bit from the first time to address a couple of issues in there. The second one is a copy of a memo and a copy of water quality data from our folks at SMAS from last year when they did some extended sampling for us. I'm not going to talk to this at length because it's new information to you. I will point out that when we were here before you last time, there was a question as to what our baseline was and where we were with the SMAS and our water quality management department needs, which we understand is potentially or is different from your own needs. But what I've done here is taken a very select set of that data, which is those days when the salinity at a specific station was above 25, meaning that normalized sort of flow is occurring in the Little Pond. There are 4 or 5 days where the salinity at a specific station was below 25, it would indicate that you had rainfall events and other things. I plotted each one of the valid sample dates for total nitrogen, which is the parameter of concern for us, primarily showing from the upper end, the head end of Little Pond, down to the outlet at the 9 stations they had, the profile of nitrogen for those days. And the last graph that you will find in there is they've all plotted together to give you an indication last year of the sort of consistency every 2 weeks when we had salinity above 25 at the key station. And then we are hoping for our needs of measuring total nitrogen, where we think we're taking up 20% or better with the proposed plan, to be able over a couple of years to see a difference from this graph. And I think if you looked at the data collected back prior to 2002, which was the last data set really available to anybody, there weren't many points, they were a little bit all over the map. We are still in the process of getting the complete data set from 2002 through 2011 with some financial issues, payment we don't have in our hand, but we made the statement last time that we built a plan. We believe we had a good plan for our needs based upon conversation with SMS, but we didn't have the data in front of us. So tonight I tried to rectify that by giving you a copy of that data for just last year. The last thing in your set is very procedural. I learned that the mere fact that I'm a special town employee and the vice chair of the Water Quality Management Committee doesn't mean that I can apply to the Conservation Commission. So this is
So
actually...
all it means as a very special town employee is you don't get paid and you're subject to all the laws, and you can be thrown in jail just like a regular employee.
Really, yeah. Yep. Well, it's 12 by 12. It's actually pretty good abode, I hear. But this is actually a resubmittal of the notice of intent signed by the town manager. Okay? So again, 12 copies for procedural things. And the last 2 pieces of paper I handed out to you, they're stapled together. One is, I think it's a little structured. We were asked who's in charge last time, and really, ultimately, the town manager signing in his authority position, because we, as the board, work for the Board of Selectmen. But we did get, between the DNR, Greg Frazier, Chuck Martins, and ourselves, we worked out a definition of roles and responsibilities, which we already sort of had, but we put that together, and I think that was sent along to you by Chuck, but I gave 12 copies for the record. And lastly, when we were here last time, we did not officially have the DEP file number. I am giving you a copy of an email sent to Siakopoulos with our DEP file number. So with that, I think the paperwork and the procedural background is in place. Let me just introduce that this is the aquaculture demonstration project. It's being done under the sort of management direction of the Water Quality Management Committee. The actual physical aspect of putting shellfish in the water and watching the shellfish has to be done under the Department of Natural Resources because of the selectmen's position with holding the shellfish propagation permit and how that all goes together.
Can I turn some lights on? See the presentation?
Thank you, Ed.
You can do all the one except the upper one, except turn that one on.
Oh,
No, and all the way to the left.
No.
Yeah, and then turn all the rest off.
The right, one all the way to the right off.
Good.
Perfect. Yay.
All right.
Put this out before, very quick background again. We're working under something called Article 17. There was a substantial amount of money designated to the selectmen to use under our sort of management auspice. We have several demonstration projects. For those of you that sat through the town meeting, we had a nice presentation on it. I won't go into a lot of details. But this is the one where we're looking at trying to actually measure the effect of an aquaculture project at a sufficient density to make a difference. So we can come up with a measurement scheme that the DEP will help to utilize for us going forward and think about it. We've had good town-wide support for this project. We've had good board support from across the town, including your board. We've had several presentations. And that's enough said there. We'll go through that. So just a quick overview. We came before you, got permission to put some bags into Little Pond and Green Pond last year. Ron Zweig found a couple of locations for us. We did that. We've come up with a description of what we want to do. I think we met informally with you and talked about that at one point. We touched upon the monitoring plan, and our consultant, Mr. Brawley, will cover that a little bit more. We've modified the monitoring plan to address some of the issues raised by your board. We think we're hopefully getting to where we need to be. And then I talked briefly before this with a piece of paper, the roles and responsibilities of who we are as a committee and the interaction with the Department of Natural Resources. I'm going to read every single line of this chart. No, not really. This just shows that, this is a little summary table we've been using showing, we put bags of oysters in last year. They grew. We had very, very low mortality. And so that was encouraging. There wasn't a lot of difference in what happened in Green Pond versus what happened in Little Pond. In fact, sort of surprising how good it was in Little Pond. I guess I don't know enough about raising oysters, but I was pleasantly surprised. So we're encouraged. We've come forward to the next step. Okay, what are we doing? We're really trying to evaluate the advantage or disadvantage or what the real world issues are going to be about raising aquaculture, in this case specifically oysters, positive and or negative impacts upon the body of water they're in, because I think up until now most of them have been open water body or higher flow water bodies for these type of concentrations. So we're entering a new area here we want to check into. I tend to think this is a way of, in some ways, keeping a polish on some of the estuaries. With other things we're doing, a range of activities that we're building up. But let's see. Our goals are, let's put enough oysters into a body of water, in this case Little Pond, that we can have a detectable change in water quality. And that's key here, not to make the biggest change in water quality, but to be able to get a detectable change and measure a number against a change so we can start to help to quantify it. And we think this is there's some challenges in that, but we're ready. We also want to measure to the extent of public acceptance. How does the public who looks out at this body of water feel about the floating bags, the impacts it may or may not have visually or from access or usage? What's the right thing? We obviously would like to learn more about, from the town's perspective of running this, what are the logistics? We're going to talk a little bit when we get into it about the storm management plan. What does it mean when a storm's coming up? What's the level of effort? How do you handle those type of things? We've been advised by our consultant and through his conversations with the Division of Marine Fisheries and others that we really should do this over a 3-year period to be able to see a change. I think we all appreciate from the last conversation, one season's worth of data may be not the same as the next season's worth of data, and so having at least several years in a row will help us to see if we just got lucky the first year, we're spot on the first year, or unlucky the first year. So that's why it's a 3-year period we're trying to do it. Everything is being done in accordance with the Mass DEP's guidance, which is a little bit of soft guidance, because they're really relying upon us to build this plan and put it in front of them. But more importantly, the sort of ongoing discussion of the Division of Marine Fisheries around putting these many oysters in this location and everything else. We're specifically trying to measure nitrogen uptake for our needs as working towards the TMDL. That's the total maximum daily limit of nitrogen that you can put into the water body. There's a value for what they call the Sentinel Station. We want to see if we can make a difference towards achieving that value. And then lastly, and this has gotten added from the last time, we want to monitor and measure for the resource protection goals of this commission. And we need to talk a little bit about that tonight. Very, very quick overview. Town's the applicant. Last time around, we had walked in having notified the 2 people where we were going to get into Little Pond. We understood clearer last time that all abutters within 100 feet of where the bags will need to be notified. SIA put all those things in. Did you hand over the green cards yet? SIA. So we've handed across the green cards and everybody's been notified. As we said, Department of Natural Resources is really doing the installation and managing. Who do you contact? We're going to post signs near the installations. We have a number set up. SIA, who is our technical liaison, answers that phone on a regular basis. So that's who the first point of contact will be. She knows whether to get a hold of Ron, me, Chuck Martinson or one of the interim employees we're going to have who's actually going to take care of the bags and turn them over. We're going to access from Narragansett Street, Little Bear Road, 20 by 20 staging area, up away from any resource areas where there's actual vegetation of concern growing for you. You'll see later a picture. We've got a little john boat. It's fairly light. It can be picked up by 4 to 6 individuals and launched, so we don't have to back a trailer in over anything to get it in and out of the water. And we do have the permission from the abutting property owners, but it is not a public access. We're not creating public access to Little Pond through this project. And there's the boat. I believe it used to go around the lagoon at the wastewater plant. And I think, John,
Ew.
you pick it up from here? John will explain the actual process and procedure of how many seeds we want to put in at what time and in what order, and what we're measuring and what we're hoping to measure and see along the way.
My name is John Brawley. I'm with the Woods Hole Group. This slide is showing, so we went through several iterations of planning for the project, and the idea is to maximize the amount of nitrogen removed from Little Pond in the demonstration project basically with what means that were available. Oysters come, oyster seed is a term for small oysters that come from hatcheries. They're typically about 2 millimeters in size when they're commercially available from hatcheries, or just made available. And they grow to about up to maybe 2 inches in length in a typical growing season from May through October. So for the purpose of this project, we came up with a plan to begin in the spring, this time of year, in May, with hatchery seed at 2 millimeters and grow them, and then add, when they get through the gear that is used to grow them out, the upweller system, which I'll explain in a minute, another batch of seed would come through and supplement that crop. So basically there'll be two crops, and the reason for doing this is because in the following year, that second crop can be retained in Little Pond, put back. It's only about 1.5 inches in length, average shell size. They have to be out of there because DMF wants shellfish in this water body to be removed before they reach 3 inches. But that seed would be retained in Little Pond and then grown a second season. And the reason for doing that is because the larger the oyster, the more nitrogen is removed. And I can go through that. So this table here is showing for this year and next year, starting with 1.25 million seed, early and late, in this process of piggybacking the 2 crops each year, how many kilograms of the massive nitrogen would be removed by just assimilation into the animal's tissue and shell as a percent in kilograms, but also as a percent of the seasonal load of nitrogen that's entering Little Pond from the watershed, the atmosphere, et cetera. And that number is based on the MEP modeling, watershed modeling activities that came up with the actual loads. And interrupt me if you have any, if I'm going, if you have any questions about that.
The one before?
Yeah.
So, let me just understand. I know we talked, and the maximum will be a 2-acre coverage.
Right.
So you're going to start out with May, more or less,
Yep.
1.25 million seed. Then later in the season, you'll put those will grow up to a certain size, but you'll put another set of seed out.
Right.
Then you're going to overwinter them. And then the next year, you're going to have another set of seed. That's the 1.25 million there.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2.5 million are also going to be there, but they're not seed anymore, they're little oysters.
Right.
Or medium oysters.
So, and really the plan is that the early crop, the early seed will reach a size where it's approaching the threshold that DMF would prefer that they get relayed. So then they'll go through a depuration process to be relayed, incorporated into the town's existing propagation program.
Okay.
If there's enough time and available labor, that crop can be what's called graded, sorted out, where the smaller ones can come back and go with the late seed. So
Yeah.
it's really designed to maximize the subsequent years' nitrogen removal.
Okay.
And this sort of shows that.
Ooh, yes. Should I explain this, or?
Sure.
Okay. Well, what this is showing is that what I just explained. It's the upweller is basically from May through, for about a month, and then the grow-out bags through the middle of the summer, then the first batch goes to depuration. A pointer would be easier. And then the second one showing the same process, and it's being overwintered. And then that overwintered is going into the following year, it's 2014, there we go. And growing to it's grow bags, it's the mesh size of the bags, those
Right.
millimeters. And then going to depuration. And then there's also another batch going in with that, in the spring. That's what it's supposed to be showing, yes.
Where are you going to overwinter? In place, in situ, or are you going to remove them?
Yeah, it can be removed, and it's what's called pitted. Oysters go dormant in the wintertime. Routinely, they're taken out and put in root cellars or in coolers. As long as they're kept moist and not dried out, they'll survive the winter out of the water. Some can be taken out and placed in a pit or a cooler, and they could also just be placed on the bottom, the flotation removed, put on the bottom, and they'll survive the winter. And then brought back up in the spring.
You haven't decided? You haven't decided what you're going to do?
That's
I mean, that's one of my concerns with wildfowl use in the winter,
And what's that concern?
that they eat stuff that
From the
floats
bottom.
up from the bottom.
Right.
And so if it's covered with oysters, I mean, I suppose if it's just 2 acres worth, there's still going to be lots of stuff elsewhere,
Right.
so.
Yeah. Presumably, if there's it's not going to be a solid. It's not like a pavement on the bottom, but they would be covering a certain. If this is a mesh
Area.
bag, it's covering a certain area on the bottom. But the option is to remove them also.
Yeah, well, we could
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yep.
I think it would be better taken because the depuration has gone and what's left is just that 1.25 millimeter.
So there'll be fewer of them, you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah.
It'll be half of the growing is the 2 million.
Yeah.
And one leaves, that's what that
Right.
depuration, and then the other is just half of that left.
And it may be decided maybe half of them are pitted and half are,
Yeah, it
some
might be
kind of
worth-
optimal.
It might be worth, right, it might be worth
Right.
trying that.
Right.
Yeah, can I
That's a
just
good point.
comment? I'd be a little concerned about them sitting on the bottom of a very anoxic, oily-looking, dark black, whatever down there.
Right.
It's not a very good environment, in my experience. And we see a lot of samples when people want to put in docks. They show us all this ugly stuff, and
Right.
it doesn't look like good habitat.
Right, and typically in the industry, what we do is we would, every couple of weeks, remove the silt from accumulating, keep the silt from accumulating in the bags, keep them alive. This is the estimate of the time that's required to basically deploy this oyster seed in the spring, and then to remove in the fall. Basically, there are a couple of days to put the gear together, the bags and everything, the flotation out in at the site. There's a cinder block anchoring system that can be moved, and these are standard practices, by the way. So we have a cinder block, and I think we're going to have some pictures, but anchor, and the bags are attached in basically. There'll be a cinder block every 50 to 100 feet, depending on the orientation of the line. So I'm going to show some pictures of what this looks like. It'd be easier to explain that when you can see a picture. And then 5 days deploying oysters from the upweller means an upweller is the town owns a series of upwellers, and they pump water into a container that forces the water through a series of mesh bins. We call them silos. And the bottom is mesh. The oysters sit on the mesh, and the water runs through. They're able to feed. And also it removes wastes and gives them oxygen and whatnot. So basically they're graded out from the upwellers when they're at the appropriate size that can be retained in the mesh bags, and over a 5-day period they can be brought with a pickup truck in basically fish totes and scooped into the bags, sealed, and put out in the bay, pond. This is what it looks like. So here you can see these guys are by foot, by hand, just they assemble the bags on the lines and then stretch them out, and the anchor system is simply cinder blocks and enough weight to keep them stable. The access to Little Pond, as Steve mentioned earlier, is the selected site is at the end of Narragansett Bay. This is an aerial photograph. The A is the location of the staging area, which means that when any oyster gear or the oysters themselves come in, they're backed up to basically the end of the road, and they can be moved in it's like a 20 by 20 foot area that can be occupied temporarily and then accessed through that B, that corridor through. There's an existing corridor through the brush at the end of the road to the bay, to the pond. And here's a picture. And as you may know, there's that object down here beyond the piece of fence is a stormwater pipe, and that's a little pond. We've discussed the safety and taking care of the stormwater pipe through the whole process, and we're well aware of that. This is the growing area location, approximately 2 acres, which is the shaded green polygon there, and the green dot is the end of Narragansett Bay. Just want to give you a spatial reference. We talked about the depuration or relay, it's also called. It's taking the oysters from Little Pond and placing them in public harvest areas, growing areas that are open, either conditional or approved by Division of Marine Fisheries. And there are a couple of sites in West Falmouth Harbor, Quissit, Green and Great Ponds. Okay, so Steve touched on this earlier. There's a history of monitoring that's occurred in Little Pond associated with the Massachusetts Estuary Project, and the purpose of that project is to study the level of impairment of water bodies in Massachusetts and develop a total maximum daily load number, which is a regulatory process that's under the Clean Water Act. So Clean Water Act and the EPA work with each state to come up with basically a load limit of a pollutant. In this case, it's nitrogen, that the water bodies should meet to meet their their intended uses and their desired conditions.
Clean,
Yeah.
whatever the definition of that clean is in that water body.
Right. Right. And those are based on criteria that are developed by the state and the EPA. So there's several years of data that have supported that process and some modeling. The modeling in the future to show compliance or to show the type of nutrient behavior associated with this project, the amount of nitrogen removed, we'd follow the same monitoring plan to be consistent, so you have data to compare in the future to historical data. So it's basically an experiment. You have historical data, you have a treatment where you put the oysters in the water. We know from the literature, from other studies, we can estimate the amount of nitrogen that's going to be coming out through the growing season, and the resulting concentrations in nitrogen and in chlorophyll and other characteristics of the water body can be monitored consistently with the past monitoring. And then you can, through statistics, either prove or disprove your hypothesis that there's a change in water quality. Now, in previous meetings with this group, there's been concern about, well, that's good, but we're interested more in the actual environmental conditions in the pond and whether there be any kind of localized or broader ecological degradation associated with the project. And so that was brought to the table, and we've come up with additional supplemental monitoring to address those questions. Am I there yet? Or should I?
We were going to start by just talking again about what we're doing for the TMDL monitoring.
Right.
And then the next.
Okay, right. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So These, you might be familiar with this. These, let me show you what I'm saying in front. You can use the pointer.
I can find it.
Map on the left, and it's the same as on the right. The one on the right you might want to look at. The black sampling stations are the ones that, that were sampled through the Massachusetts Estuary Project. And they have proposed to continue those 4 sampling sites, the head LP1, 2, and 3, and there's a supplemental series of sites that are proposed that are shown in red, 1.1, 1.2, et cetera, that will increase the temporal frequency. Not the temporal, the spatial. Thank you. Right over here, that'll increase the spatial resolution of monitoring. And also what in the next slide will show is the temporal frequency. In the past, I think they've done they've done fewer sampling events. They're proposing to do more. This is every 2 weeks, starting in May through October, for a total of, I think there are 24 here. They're surface and bottom samples at each station, which is typical. Based on the amount of data that was reported in the MEP report for Little Pond, we ran some statistical analyses to come up with preliminary projections of how many samples would be required to be able to detect change. And so this table is showing, and this is a graphic of the table, the probability of detecting a 10% decline in total nitrogen. We were looking at total nitrogen data that were published in the MEP report. And so how to read this would be if, let's see, if the goal was to have a 0.95 probability, if you wanted to have a 95% probability of detecting a 15% decline in total nitrogen, then 70 samples would be required. Now, this is based on the variability that we were able to look at just in the limited data set. The statistician who helped us with this said that this is a conservative number. It's the worst case scenario because every year is different. If you can account for some of the variability in the system, this number can drop considerably. And with having the data, the actual raw data to look at, this number would likely be different. So that was an exercise we went through. That's the process of, when you're designing the monitoring plan, you want to know ahead of time how many samples you're going to need, and you'll know that you're going to have a probability of detecting a change of those magnitudes. Okay. These are the parameters that are going to be monitored. These are all consistent with the Massachusetts Estuary Project. These are nutrients. Chlorophyll is an indicator of the amount of phytoplankton, algae in the water column. Dissolved oxygen is important. Water transparency. Benthic condition is monitored. It's assessed every 3 years typically. And there may be others. Shellfish weight. The weight and the nitrogen content in the tissue is also will be looked at. That's an actual empirical observation of how much nitrogen is being removed.
What are you measuring with benthic condition?
What are we?
Benthic condition, you can look at invertebrates?
Yeah, they run diversity to the.
And anything about sediment characteristics?
Yeah, percent organic and percent carbon in the organics, and this is all the MEP. It's in the project plan of the MEP, so it's consistent with everything that's in the report.
Well, all of that isn't in the report, though. I've read the report.
Yeah.
But I know you're going to get those data.
Yes. And there is a quality assurance project plan associated with the MEP process. This is for the record. This is where you'll find a protocol for nutrients in the field, for the physical parameters, the field sampling protocol. And this is where you'll find this information here. And do you want to say something about this, Sia?
See, you have to go up to the computer. I mean, to the computer, to the microphone.
Sorry, what's the the quality assurance plan is a very large document that's large mainly because they have a lot of repetition in how they expect the samplers who go out and do the sampling to perform their duties for all the different parameters. Also, at the end of this quality plan, there are the initial areas that were chosen for the MEP reports, and Little Pond is in there. So what I did is I studied that document to try to pull out the pages that would be relevant to the kind of monitoring that we would be doing for the oyster project. And 358 and 363 were the two standard operating procedures when a pond watcher or a person who's entrusted with a job of collecting samples is brought into the project. They are trained, and that training has them go through a number of steps of how these samples need to be taken, the timing, the time of day, and a whole host of other requirements that they follow when they're doing the sampling. And those are reference pages where the actual instructions are, if you will. And then the other thing I thought was significant is they do have a specific handling of QA/QC. The person who's in charge of the aggregation of the collected data for a particular estuary validates the data and looks for outliers and that sort of thing. And that process is documented on page 99 of this QAPP. And the other one that I thought was important is that they have a very particular way of calibrating their instrumentation and their in the lab and in the field, so that when they're taking field samples, they go through regular calibration protocols, as well as when they're looking at nitrogen, which you have to go into a lab to do, and a couple other parameters. They have a set of expectations for the instrumentation and what kind of errors they would be measuring. So this was mostly to pull out some of the details of how the quality assurance plan works.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'd like you to do. I would like you to copy those pages and give the relevant pages into the record.
Sure.
Okay? Or you could give us the whole plan, but that would make...
It can actually be sent.
Oh, it's a disc?
It is.
All right, then give us the disc to
If
put
you'd
in.
like me to burn you a CD,
Yeah,
I'd be happy.
absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I touched upon a little earlier monitoring for the Conservation Commission, addressing questions about the kind of instantaneous impacts, if any, of this project in the immediate area and within Little Pond itself. Basically, we discussed deploying some continuous data loggers, and what these are instruments that have meters on them that will read. You can program them to take a reading every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, every hour, every day, whatever you decide, and you end up with basically a time. These are time series data. These are from the MEP report on Little Pond from 2002. These are the parameters that we're going to look at: dissolved oxygen, turbidity, chlorophyll A, which is an indicator of plankton, and water temperature, salinity. And other things can also be measured. And what it's showing is these are every day there's variability in the system. And this is, I believe, a little out of focus. There are two stations. The top one is from 2002 during what's called the critical period. And the critical period in estuaries is when the water's warmest and there's the highest accumulation of organic matter. The seaweeds and algae in the system have been growing, animals have been growing over the spring and the beginning of the summer, and they're maxed out. And what happens is there's a lot of metabolism going on. So at night, during the daytime there's photosynthesis, and there's a lot of, this is oxygen. There's a lot of oxygen in the water column due to photosynthesis by algae. And at night there's no photosynthesis, and there's a lot of microbes eating everything that's in there. So there are a lot of kind of what's called diel fluctuations in the water, in dissolved oxygen in this case. So this is a station that's actually happens to be within the project area in that green polygon that we showed you. This is called the upper station that SMAST deployed for a 1 month period of time. This is middle of July through the middle of August when water temperatures are highest, the critical period. And the critical period is when the system's most sensitive when fish kills occur, when it's the least healthy. And this is the lower station, and this is down towards the mouth of Little Pond, kind of where it opens up. And so this would serve as a reference area, and this would be in the immediate area of the project. So what we're planning to do is to basically be consistent with this original spatial setup, and during the same critical period, deploy data loggers that will capture this information and will be able to determine basically the impact of the project, and things like the number of days that there is hypoxia, when there's low oxygen, when there are indicators that we can have that will translate into kind of a health determination of the condition of the health condition of the pond. Moving right along here. Dissolved oxygen, we look at the mean, median range. We can calculate crudely net production and system metabolism. These are all things that are important to fish and the overall productivity and health of the estuary. Hypoxia is when dissolved oxygen is less than 3 milligrams per liter. We can look at the localized impacts of this. We can look at the frequency and duration of these events. Those are when these dips occur, and this is when fish kills happen to take place. Chlorophyll A is, again, this is the amount of phytoplankton in the water column. We can look at trends in that. Oysters eat phytoplankton, so most studies have shown that when you have aquaculture operations, chlorophyll A comes down, is depressed a bit. Turbidity is the amount of material blocking light in the water column. It's usually solids, and turbidity is related to basically how much light can get to the bottom and support eelgrass, for example. If turbidity is high, it's usually a poor indicator. Turbidity could be affected by the oysters because they also pull in particulates out of the water column and bind them to their pseudofeces. We'll be looking at water temperature and salinity. Oysters really don't have much to do with salinity, but there's been some concern raised about the actual gear and whether that attracts heat or holds heat in the water column, and we'll be able to determine that. Like I said, so there's an upper pond area and a lower. This is where the project's taking place. Again, baseline conditions have been monitored already in 2002. We would do this year and subsequent years of the project. We have a storm management plan that basically is what would we do with the gear, everything that's in the water, if there is a threat of a hurricane, for example, and how many days prior to threat of a hurricane or tropical storm, what actions would be taken. The storm management plan has been submitted to the harbor master and to his office, and is being right now incorporated into the overall harbor management plan. So there's a storm management plan for aquaculture operations that we've developed.
Who makes, just one quick, who makes the call as far as who's going to be the
Chuck.
point? Chuck would be the one to
Chuck will
determine.
do that.
Yep.
And then,
Yes.
depending
Chuck and Greg.
on the level of response is determined by Chuck. The threat of what size storm or event possibly coming would be determined by,
Chuck and Greg. I mean, they're
okay, so it's,
Greg and Chuck.
Right.
okay.
And would work with the Water Quality Management Committee to take the appropriate actions
Okay.
if necessary. They could be to tie things tighter together, could be to remove things, could be to sink stuff down temporarily. Those are all options.
It sounds like you get plenty of options. I just, a lot of this is over my head as far as, and I'm loving the data coming in and good things happening. But the logistics coming in and out of there, that's where I'm, my comfort level is just, I wanted to know who the point guy is.
Right.
Because that's, you're gonna have people to help you, but
I mean, ultimately, the point guy is Julian Suso. I hope Julian is aware of that.
Yeah, let me help you out here just a little bit.
But yeah, I mean, he will do the management, the day-to-day management. It'll be through,
It's under the new reorganization, it's all under Mr. Frazier. Doug then is the person who's got the shellfish responsibility, but part of our program is actually for the town to hire an individual, or individuals, but at least one, whose primary function is going to be to take care of and manage this farm. You want to think of it that way. They're working under the direction of Chuck, so to the extent that they see a storm, or we're starting to get that prediction of whatever, this is when we came back to the early thing, where part of this project is really to get our hands around what we need to do. That's why in the first year, we're sort of starting off a little bit on the slow side with just building it up. You know, do we sink them? Do we haul them out? You know, how fast can we get them out? Do we need to find 5 people to work for 4 hours? Do we need to find 6 people to work for 2 days? I mean, in terms of even putting it in and taking it out, this gentleman's raised oysters before. He's given us some advice. But until we do it in our own body of water, we're not going to have an exact thing. But you came back to some spot where we talked about dates and times to put things in the water. You know, prepare the bags, get them in and out. The bags only weigh, what, about, when they're heavy, like 40 pounds each, 30, 40 pounds each?
Yeah.
At the most, right? So if they're not the weight of a cement bag. They're more like, you know, some
Art mulch.
mulch. Exactly. It's more. I was trying to think what out of the nursery. It's the lighter bag a little bit, but it's got mass. So if we have hundreds of those bags that we have to get out because the storm's so massive, we're going to bring them up and throw them into a parking lot someplace and let the rain come on them and basically survive the storm that way, but not be in the water to cause a problem. You know, working our way through that level of effort is part of what we're trying to learn by doing this. But we've had good volunteer, we've had good professionals, and we are hiring somebody specifically to run the project. You know, a person who that's their job.
Thank you.
Just don't go away because I'm sure I can't answer half the questions.
Right. I want to
Good to fire.
I'll give this back to Chris.
So that's what we'd like to do. We hope that you can find your way to an order of conditions for us. I heard a couple of things in the course of this presentation that, to the extent as you write up order of conditions, we would hope you'd tell us what your expectations are. One is maybe a little more clarity on what we will be doing on the overwintering. I heard, you know, how we're going to do that. The question about benthic conditions and sampling, apologize we didn't have our hands wrapped around that, but if there's things that your commission's interested in, we can obviously add that to whatever the sample protocol is going to be for benthic conditions. And lastly, I heard that we should get you a complete disc or copy of the SMAST. Say that again? QAP.
okay, thank you, all of you. Yeah, we're going to go down the table for some questions. And, yeah, some of these things we'll want that could be put in conditions, and some, I'd like to refine some things with you a little bit more, but I think we can work around those. I think our 2.5 hour meeting last week was very productive.
Yep.
I think we'll all agree, and I know you
Absolutely.
guys stayed and continued to work. Ed?
Yeah. We have a lot of guys named Murphy in this town. I think of Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. There's one thing here, as I'm looking at the presentation, that I guess if I was in charge of this project, it would keep me awake nights. And that's that pipe, because your whole growing area is right by the outlet of that pipe coming down Narragansett Street. So I guess I have a question, what is the security on that pipe? I mean, in the middle of the night, people are sometimes known to do dumb things like pour a gallon of bad gasoline down a drain somewhere, and it could be a drain that leads to that very pipe and destroy the whole project in one quick move. Have you thought about security on that pipe? Talk to me, make me feel comfortable about that.
I'd say there's a pretty good understanding of the neighborhood of what we're doing and why we're trying to do it. The drain serves the neighborhood, so I think it's, again, a little bit of continuing the public notification
A sign there,
campaign.
maybe, a sign?
We signage, I've seen places where I know they paint the thing on the catch basin saying drains directly to. I mean, we should walk around and see what they're doing on that, and maybe add a stencil. We could add a stencil.
Ed,
Just a suggestion.
I'm just going to suggest, I think that's a really good suggestion. I think there should be an outreach by the committee and maybe a one-page explanation about how, you're never supposed to put oil down the pipe, but in particular, this is what's being done there, and so you really want to minimize. So maybe, draft, you could work on drafting
Yeah.
something and then just going and giving it to everybody who
Absolutely.
has access to.
Yeah, we met with the Teachers
Basins.
Association at least 4 times, 2 sort of formally, twice sort of informally. They're the sort of first way of getting information out, but getting to everybody, great idea.
Maybe even when we start, when we're there, there's probably going to be some, people are going to see us there, doing the initial, and we'll have things to hand out. And Woods Hole Group did the beginnings of a brochure, which is lovely,
Yeah.
and we could add to that.
Nope.
Don't make it too complex. People don't like to read.
Keep it under 100 pages,
How many?
under 100.
Under 100.
We'll definitely be under 100. I
100,
can assure you we'll be under 100 pages.
Maybe not more than one, but
Okay, we'll try to
under
get close to
100.
1. But under 100.
Yeah. Ed,
That's it.
anything else, Michelle?
Thank you.
Well, I think the stormwater pipe is a good point that Ed raised, and maybe as a result of this project, if you go back to the aerial picture you just showed, I mean, they're just for a future project for the town, putting in a stormwater retrofit for that pipe in that area between the end of the road and the water body, might be a great area for that. It could be another demonstration project on how we can deal with stormwater. Stormwater is also one of the sources of nitrogen too. So I know that's not part of this project, but.
Well, don't be
Sorry.
surprised if you find us back in here someday with a stormwater retrofit type program.
Well,
We
that
have,
might
we
be
have a couple of different areas. We've got some initial information through the town engineer and where they're at with the stormwater management plan they've got to do. We have looked at where the maps are for all the stormwater drains coming into Little Pond.
Excellent.
That's not this summer, though.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
And one of the things that has been brought up is that there may be increased nitrogen loading because of that stormwater pipe. And so we have talked about, when we do our nitrogen measurements, making sure that if there's been a storm event, that we try to characterize any particular pollutant
That's a really good idea.
that's coming right from there because of that. Right, Mike?
Yes.
Yes, that's been brought up. So I think we're going to try to grab some.
I'm going to suggest one other thing with the pipe, and that is, I know there's some brush, and I normally would not want you to cut brush, but I think it would be better to have a path, not right over the pipe.
Right, yeah, I mean,
I know
structural
that-
integrity
I know
of
that pipe's there, but I think that pipe should be protected, and I think you should make a parallel path, and, once, if this project is only a 3-year project, then part of your responsibility will be
Store it.
to restore it.
Restore it, sure.
Right, but I think you should protect that,
Yeah.
rather than drop the John boat on it. Okay.
Yeah, my tendency when coming before a Conservation Commission is not to ask to cut down any brush on the side of the water body.
Well,
So I'm glad to hear it.
we certainly appreciate that, but,
But I'm with you.
okay.
And also, I'm very appreciative for the extra information that you provided. It sounds like you really took the suggestions from the last meeting to heart, coming back. And so it's great to see this water quality data and whatnot. I mean, we did get it tonight, so I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, and I
to look
apologize for
through
not
it.
getting to you earlier, but trust me, we're in the process of having the town pay outstanding bills with SMAS to get a whole lot of data released to us all the way from 2002 up to 2012. And I will not attempt to characterize the correspondence or favors we went through to get the 2012 data, when we got it, and when I was certain that I could actually publicly state that we had the data before your committee. That's only been the last couple of days. So I gave it to you as soon as we had it, in a format that was logical rather than just a raw block of data.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I also recognize that was a
Interesting
very difficult-
exercise.
Very difficult challenge,
Interesting exercise.
and we're still working on that challenge, but this was a good step forward, and I appreciate that for all of you.
Other questions?
Mike?
Could you set up some trigger values? Some trigger values that say something's going wrong. Maybe it's a count on dead oysters. Maybe it's dissolved oxygen. Maybe my concern is something's going wrong in the pond. You can't, I don't know what it is, but you want something to say something's wrong.
Yep.
Whatever it is,
Nope.
you tell me what it is, and then trigger it to some value that says, if this happens, we will take action, whatever that action is. It's
You don't
similar
want
to a
everything
storm.
to go sour at once.
I don't want everything to go and I don't want 2
I
weeks later
characterize
for
it as what's
someone
my
to come
turn,
back and
what's
say,
the turnaround point? I'd say there's two things that we need to figure that out for. One is the oysters that we're most interested in, something that we might see that would tell us we have an issue with the oysters that we have to deal with. And then the second one is, are the oysters doing something to water quality that we
And
need
some
to,
values
even
that
though the
you're
oysters may
measuring.
be happy, it's not good for water quality for whatever other reason, we'd have to move away. You want to talk about the oyster side of it?
Yeah, well, these oysters will be in the surface water, so the likelihood of them succumbing to low dissolved oxygen is fairly low. So they're going to be up high, and that's where most of the oxygen is present. If there's a disease, so they're going to be tested for disease prior to being put in the pond. But sometimes disease will come in and take them. Typically, disease doesn't manifest until the second or third year of adult oysters, so the likelihood is fairly low. But we'll have people maintaining the project regularly. We'll be able to see any kind of changes in the health of the oysters.
What type of, I mean, if I trust you and Chuck when you look at these things to say they look healthy, they don't look healthy. I mean, I saw the 3 bags we had in Little Pond and the 3 bags we had in Green Pond last summer.
Right.
But the actual person who's looking at the oysters,
Yeah,
Ron, maybe help us out here. Can people who are working with the oysters, will they detect that the oysters are not healthy?
Yes.
And how do they detect that? How do they visually detect that? What would make them say these aren't healthy oysters and we should stop and rethink what we're doing?
Well, they'll either die and be open and smell, or they will stop growing. Those are the 2 ways you can tell if they're healthy or not. And when they can stop growing, sometimes, and this happened up in Duxbury last year, we think, and on other places in the Cape where a certain species of phytoplankton came in that wasn't good. The oysters didn't like it. It was a noxious algae. And it was there for a couple of weeks. They stopped growing, and they basically form a check mark in the shell where they stop. And then when the water turns around a bit, they have a healthy food supply, they start growing again. But they're tenacious though.
So
My-
I think the response I'm hearing is we are monitoring their growth rate. We're weighing them on a regular basis, and we start to see that we have oysters that aren't growing beyond the obvious. They're dead and stinky,
Right.
which we don't expect. But if we see that we're having a real problem with the growth rate, we should have that as a flag.
I'm back. I don't know enough about it to set the trigger value, but I'm saying that in your QAP, some language that says, if we're monitoring this, whatever it is, dissolved oxygen or growth or disease or color or whatever you can come up with, that says something is wrong, we notice it on this day, and we'll take action because we saw it. And that's, I'm not smart enough or knowledgeable enough to set those values, but someplace in the co-op that says on a regular basis, make me feel better.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, but there are 2 issues that Steve brought up. One is the issue of the oysters. The second is the issue of the water quality is there fish in there, et cetera.
Need to talk a little bit among ourselves, perhaps, or whatnot, where we're putting in those sort of continuous monitors, where we're measuring
Data monitor.
those values. We're seeing that data how frequently, how often do we download it?
However frequently you want to.
It's pretty easy to download, as I
Just
understand.
typically every couple of weeks, but it could be designed for every week. The data are downloaded, look at the bottom water DO levels. If the frequency and duration of hypoxia is just abnormally, doesn't look right compared to the reference area,
Yeah, who's gonna be downloading the data? Is it gonna be the technician?
Yeah.
We believe it's the technician or Sia or
You're
me.
gonna train?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but, yeah, we could talk about that. I mean, that's something we could,
I mean, we could easily, as, you know, every time we download it, if you want, we'll provide you back a copy of whatever we've downloaded too for your records, so
Yeah.
something like that.
yeah, and there may be time, you know, if, you know how some summers, you know, most summers here are pretty good, but some summers we have 10 days in a row that are 90 degrees. And at that point, we might want you to be doing it more often because that's a time we would expect more of a problem.
Right.
Understood.
Yeah, and the other thing is, well, and it's what you're bringing up this trip point. What's the trip point that we have to worry about? But I also think you're gonna have a couple of technicians who are out there regularly.
Yes.
I think you should design sort of a checklist that they can say, you know, and you, again, you would be the one who would be able to put down, you know, is growth slowing? Is there a stress line, et
Right.
cetera? So we have that information, and then we can compare it with the data that we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, last summer, we had a sort of a nominal checklist when we went out to see the bags, and we kept track of little things. We'll have a more detailed checklist this year.
Yeah.
but
And
that's-
I'll add one more thing. As part of the Division of Marine Fisheries permit, this is going to be run under a research permit from DMF, and they require a regular monitoring of condition, like growth rates. So we'll take
Great.
a sampling of the shell lengths, overall condition.
On a periodic,
Yeah,
once a week or
exactly.
something.
yeah, it's every-
You
And
do 100 or
every
1,000
couple
or
of
I think it's every two, I think DMF's gonna make us measure everything every
Every 2 weeks, great.
yeah. So some of that hold back to that sampling program beyond the continuous monitors is really on a little bit of a 2-week cycle right now in terms of gathering stuff, getting it, put it out there, give it to the DMF and everybody else. The continuous ones, if we need to download them weekly or more frequently, we can, you know, again, I think it's back to not a single value, but looking at the pattern shifting and changing those continuous monitors. It's something that's crazy. We get obviously a very wet period in July. You can expect the salinity values to start looking interesting.
Yeah, well, and that happens
Right.
some years.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we may get slower growth because we're not getting what we need for the oysters at that point, so we'll.
Or
again,
not.
Or not.
Or not.
Or not.
We'll see.
That's what we're hoping.
Okay, I have a couple of other questions on this, but I'm gonna let the other people have questions, and then I'll come back.
Interesting presentation. I was not here for the first time. Grateful for what I'm looking at tonight. A lot of this is, like I said, it's a little bit over my head as far as, I just know I wanted to go in the water, live, and grow. Outside of that,
And you don't want them to negatively affect the water for other organisms.
and that would be exactly how I
What you were
would
gonna say.
expect.
I knew that.
You know, and that was all. My concern, and I do have a better comfort level knowing who's at point and the response time, and that's it.
Tom?
I have no questions, just I like this letter from the DNR. That definitely makes me feel more comfortable. Great presentation. I like the idea of a little bit more neighborhood outreach and some access next to that drainage pipe. That sounds good to me, and I'm looking forward to seeing some results.
Very good.
Well, and that leads me into my first question, which is, one of the conditions that I'm going to suggest to the board is that before we have a second and a third year of the project, you come back and actually present us with a report as to what happened the previous summer.
Absolutely.
Which also includes all the data that were collected, what conclusions you have from those data, what worked, what didn't work, and where we're going to go next.
And a bucket of ice with some of your samples.
But
Only
not
one,
right
only one bucket. You must not have much of an appetite, sir.
For each, a bucket for each of us.
Nothing for the first year.
Yeah, I don't want
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not gonna eat those.
Well, there's two of us.
Yeah. And I do appreciate all the effort that you guys have gone to since we last saw you. I think this is
Others may write about what's going on, but we're all working together as committees is the way I look at it.
we are working together, and I think
It's been
I
good.
think this project is vastly improved, and I think it can really lead to something for both Falmouth and other places who are looking at this. But I still have a couple of questions.
I knew you did.
I'm just confirming, and I did confirm this with you, John, that it's just a 2-acre site. That's the maximum.
Maximum.
And also, I don't know that there are any neighbors here. Are there any neighbors from Little Pond? Are you going to want to say something? Okay, well, I'm going to speak for you, because this is something John and I talked about. There are neighbors, there are people in Little Pond who use kayaks and so forth. And John assured me that you call SIA if there's a problem and you can't get through that, the bags, this network of bags, that they will work to form a pathway for people to get through.
Yeah,
So there's-
absolutely. We can, this again is back to learning what the neighborhood acceptance, the needs are, to, how the bags get configured, whether they go east to west, north to south, whether we have to leave 2 passageways, a 20-foot wide passageway, a 5-foot, whatever we need to do to
Right.
keep the neighborhood and the users happy. That's our goal.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And John knows that I want to have the pond available for wintering ducks. Stormwater
Can you
pipe.
hunt
we
on that
already did.
pond in the winter?
Huh?
Can you hunt on the pond in the winter?
No, you don't eat those ducks. You just watch them.
You eat the oysters.
You eat the oysters.
Not the ducks.
Okay, the only thing that you didn't come back with that I would like to see, because I don't quite understand, what happens when the oysters go from here elsewhere? Are they stay growing in bags?
No.
They're
they-
just dropped on the
we-
bottom?
Exactly. We literally turn the oysters over. Well, they're under the control of the Division Marine, the DNR.
Okay.
The DNR is going to relay them in areas that they've identified under their existing permit,
Okay,
quote, for deprecation. They will close that area to shellfishing. They will literally just set the oysters down, let them go off of their boat or however they put them in the water, and they will declare that you can't shellfish there for a period of time, and then
so
they'll
they're going to
reopen.
put them on a sediment bottom,
Yep.
and they should be fine.
They're not, no alteration, no floating bags, nope. They're
Okay. and
much
then
much
when-
like, much like they do to a very large extent with anything they're raising in their upwellers now. They take the seed and after it reaches a certain size,
Right.
set it out.
Right, well, I know what they do.
Broadcast, that's the word, thank you.
I know what they do with those. And let me just reinforce, I think I know this answer, but just so that everybody's clear, these are going to be relayed to you of these 5 or 6 sites. And then, after a given period of time, they will be open to, depending on where it is, commercial and/or recreational
Right, they're between
Fishermen.
the several areas.
fisher persons.
Some areas
Fishers.
are designated recreational, some areas are designated commercial and recreation,
Okay,
so. And, you asked for the annual report, quite likely, again, as we go through this, at the end of any given year, we might say, based upon how we did with productivity, the broadcasting, the deprivation, these are areas that we put them in last year, here's areas that we're going to move to in the next year, and here's additional areas. I know that they're out there looking at other locations that might get added over time, so we'll keep you informed.
okay, and the only other question that I had, and this is something that I don't think we have to decide tonight. I mean, I think this is something we could discuss, but I'm thinking it might be worth having a third monitoring station just north of the area, which presumably isn't going to be affected by the oysters at all, or hardly at all. I mean, what flow there is probably moving north to south, north to south. But we can talk about that.
Well, just to cover that, because we did, at one point in the last meeting, or the interim meeting, we did talk about, does it make sense to have 3 or not? We did work this around a little bit, and our thought was, if you go back to the 2002, they had
Well, I like
two
the idea
specific
that-
stations, so
Right, I like the idea that you can,
we chose those 2, and the
Right.
other side of it was...
so at least you have a year's
I
worth of
just-
data.
And I know that money doesn't matter at a certain level, but we started off thinking that we could get a hold of these things in the $300 to $400 a month range, just to rent them and use them. The actual cost to us is going to be closer to $1,000 a month for each one of these units. So again, we're in the process of juggling budgets around, and so part of that was, if they were back at that 300 or 400, I think we would have gone with the 3, just because that was the initial discussion. John looked at it a little bit, we looked at how we're setting up, we think 2 works, so maybe try it the first year. If we think we're not getting good data, we could add another one in the second or third year, but we're trying to juggle a little bit of the money side of it. We have a certain amount of money for water quality, and based upon what we're building here for a model with you, we're then going to be looking at what we have to do in some of the other estuaries for things like the inlet widening and everything. So we're adjusting our water quality
This might be-
monitoring budgets as well.
Right, this might be something, there are units available that might be available to.
That would be
supplement
wonderful to
this.
hear. That would be wonderful to hear.
Yeah. Okay, Jen, you have any questions?
Motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Don't we need that?
Second.
Okay, I am going to say one thing. I mean, I'll vote to close the hearing now. I have enough information, but I am going to remind you again. You know what I'm going to remind you, and I know you're going to say, well, we just got the data, that we need the data, we need any information for a meeting.
We're all in this together. When we get something, you're going to get it.
Yeah, but we need it a week before.
Understood. Understood. If you need time to read through that and look at it, take your time.
Madam Chairman,
Public comment.
are we closing the
Yeah.
hearing without
Yeah.
all the information that you just requested, the CD and all of that?
Well, the CD can be
Okay.
put in. I mean, the
Alright.
reference material is here.
Okay.
What?
Do you need me to,
No, that's
No,
fine.
no, 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 no.
you're good.
No, I want to see if there are any more questions on the board, and then I'm going to open it for public comment. Any questions in the audience? Mike?
My name's Mike McGrath. I'm an engineer. I wholeheartedly support this project. I also spoke at town meeting and said that we should sewer both these peninsulas because of the density. It may well be that we should leave these oysters in longer because of the construction of the cesspools that exist there. We may find that it's going to take a very long time for the nitrogen that's in the groundwater to actually wash into the pond. But this is a great step, and I wholeheartedly support the effort, and I want to thank the committee for their efforts.
We don't know how long this effort's going to be. This is a pilot project, and we're getting started. It's a new venture. We'll see where we go.
As someone that's done some innovative work, they will learn by doing, believe me.
Any other questions? Okay, Steve?
No, I just,
Final words?
thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, too.
Thank you, Mr. Rafferty.
I am, by the way, though, one of the conditions is we're also by, sometime during the middle of the winter, we would like to see an analysis of the data from 2002 to the present. It would be interesting to see the trends, because you can't, as we've already discussed, you can't see trends when all you're given is the mean of a bunch of.
As soon as we get it and have a chance to have it in our hands, even if we get it before the winter, we'll pass it along to anybody that's interested.
Okay, thanks. But be sure you get it by the winter. is what I'm saying.
I anticipate it's a lot sooner than that. I mean, the whole process of appropriations and payments, and it gets a little complicated because there's the western estuaries and the southern estuaries, and different funding sources for paying them were coming from different areas, and it's just been a little bit of an accounting exercise to get it all done. But it's, see, last time I heard, we'd gone from the who owes who what to here's how it's going to be paid, and here's the date the checks are getting done or transferred over, and here's the date we should finally see it, so.
Okay,
It-
but
it will
as far
be-
as this project, right now, I'm just interested in Little Pond,
Little Pond,
the story of Little Pond.
story of Little Pond.
Okay, thanks. So motion is second on the table, right, Susan?
Right, that's it.
Okay, final comments. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you, when you go out, if you want to talk to one another, either go out the door or go around the corner?
I have it.
Thank you, I'm reading from my plane ride tomorrow morning.
They might finish.
This is, did you put everybody else?
I did. I
Do we
did.
have an extra? I have some notes here that well, Jen, will we vote this next week or the week after? I'll talk to you because I want some of these conditions.
Yeah, we'll talk next week.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, that's a nice picture.
I can get rid of that for you if you would like.
Can we turn it off though and pull up the screen?
It's distracting Susan.
It isn't? I thought it was a little pond in the winter time.
Now be careful, the next time you look, all those ice will be gone.
That's awesome.
Those are the mountains of Mara Vista.
Yeah. Okay, Black Beach Harbor Head Association, Little Neck Bars Road, Black Beach Hills Road, Gilbert Lane, and Drift Road, West Falmouth, for permission to implement proposed road maintenance and storm management improvements that includes vegetated swales and addition of dense grade crushed stone along approximately 1 mile of private gravel roads and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, the quorum on this project is Tommy, Mike, Betsy, Tom, and Michelle.
Where
Last.
were you, Ed?
Ed was not
Oh, you weren't here at that
He was at
right.
precinct meeting, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. But you have an email in
Yeah, you
your,
had
in
comments that
the
came to
record
all of us.
with Commissioner Schmidt's concerns that was submitted for the record, so that's in there. And the last time we asked for volume calculations for the swales to determine that they were correctly sized and whether or not they should be a wet or dry swale. Provide information regarding the use of alternative methods for a road base, kind of like the GeoWeb type material that Commissioner West spoke of, and designs for possibly narrowing the road to help the association reduce the speeds over there, because speed is definitely a problem with the way the road reacts to that over time.
Did you mention
Oh, and the operation and maintenance plan.
sedimentation?
Oh, that was it to our sedimentation plan. So that's the information the board was looking for the last time.
Good evening, Jack.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Jack Vaccaro, Vaccaro Environmental Consulting.
You can go on, I'm just gonna,
I'm distracted.
sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
As you know, this hearing was continued from March 27th, at which time the commission had some comments regarding the proposed work. I should say with me tonight is Jack Landers-Colley, the project engineer, who has devised these road improvements and stormwater management improvements. And also in the audience this evening is Bill Resnikoff from the Black Beach Harbor Head Association. So my summary of additional information requests from the last meetings is similar to what was just stated by your agent. Many of the issues that were asked of us at that time are more of in the area of engineering design, relating to the design capacity of the swales, the appropriateness of embedded mesh material for the road surface, the side wall of the swales for stability. There was one issue that fell more under my umbrella, which related to the proposed seed mix that we've specified for these drainage swales. There was a comment from one commissioner that we should perhaps evaluate that seed mix and make sure it's appropriate for different hydrologic conditions that we might expect to occur within the drainage swales. So what I have done is I've looked at the proposed bottom elevations for these swales. I've looked at the specified seed mix and cross-referenced that to the National List for Plants Occurring in Wetlands, the Massachusetts list that's published by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There are 6 herbaceous species that are specified in the seed mix that we've proposed. 3 of those are actually good wetland plants. They're facultative or fact-wet species. 3 others are more expected in upland circumstances. So the seed mix does represent a good mix of species that would be appropriate for a wide range of hydrologic conditions. So my feeling is that the seed mix we're proposing is adequate for all of these swales. With that, because the other issues that were raised by the Commission at the last hearing, again, are more under the area of road design and civil engineering, I'd like to just turn it over at this point to Jack Landers-Colley to address some of your concerns related to the design of these vegetated swales.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jack Landers-Colley. I need to digress a little bit. And I wasn't here at the first meeting, and I apologize for not being here, but I was out of the country. So let me back up and just state a few things which might be redundant, perhaps not. I had the opportunity of reviewing Jack's commentary about the meeting, and a couple things were said, and I don't know if it was because of the busyness of the plan, but one of them was we needed to depict the low points, the high points. This depicts a high point. That LP means low point. That's a low point. There's a high point. The other is the center line stationing also indicates what the elevations are along the existing roadway. Jack characterized this as a civil engineering design. I think I'd rather state it's more an approach to try to simplify correcting a problem. I almost don't want to use the term engineering design, but perhaps using a common sense approach to a problem that exists for this association. And what I mean by that is all along we felt the directive of the Commission was to identify resource areas and the best way to protect them, as well as accomplish the goal of providing reasonable service to the inhabitants of this area. And to that end, Jack located these wetlands which we, or identified these wetlands which we located and highlighted in green. And is shown on the first, second, third, and fourth pages. I have the first and second here, and I have the third and fourth on the back side, but I think many of the issues really focus around the first page. If there are other issues, we can certainly discuss them. The other was clarification of where we propose super elevating the roadway. Having said that, I go back to the term designing, of civil engineering design. What we intend to do is, again, protect the resource areas. In the course of doing that, we identified the sensitive receptors, this wetlands, as well as this body of water. Throughout this entire area, we only have one man-made structure that we could find and identify, and that was a culvert right here. And it was significant in the sense that we knew that it was an area that could potentially transfer silts and possibly hydrocarbons that come off the road because of the passing of vehicles, as well as any other perhaps animal waste that might be on there, or other debris that would normally fall on the road. So our goal in this area, or what I believe our goal should be, is to try to entrap the surface water that would flow off and potentially go into the culvert. And the reason I say that is that this super elevation that we have here was proposed to direct the water, the surface water on the road, away from this particular wetland resource area, because we felt it was extremely sensitive in comparison to these others. I'm not saying they aren't important, but we felt this was more important. And in order to avoid or reduce the potential of water flowing into this culvert directly off the road, we decided that we would put these swales in, or areas to detain water that would run off from a small storm event. So our original thinking was not necessarily to design capturing all the water, but to capture some of it. Now, to that end, what I did is I calculated what the surface water flow would be per lineal foot of the roadway. And I think it's described in the narratives. Based on the width, what we did is we took a coefficient of runoff, we took the width, and we took a rainfall intensity, and we came up with a volume varying, I think, from 1.1 cubic feet per lineal foot of road to 1.7 feet of lineal road, of runoff per lineal foot of road. And then, comparing that to the high points, we can determine that the water that could potentially run off, or would run off, would start here and run down here, where this is higher than this point. It would run past here and would be contained in here, in these swales along here. Likewise, there's a high point here. The water would flow this way and that way towards a low point, and there's a high point here. But if you look at the elevations, you'll see this is extraordinarily flat, or without measuring it, if you walked it, you knew it was flat anyways. So our goal wasn't complete entrapment of that initial volume of runoff.
Jack, how much water are you trapping in the swales? I think that was the question the commission wanted to know. We understand how the road was designed.
Okay.
Their question was
our-
how much water
In our
is
original
being-
cross-section, we showed a 2-foot wide with side slopes.
Yeah.
That was approximately a foot deep. So that would hold anywhere between 2 and 3 cubic feet per lineal foot of road.
Okay,
Okay, so if you start here, that means that this would contain 1.7 feet of runoff per lineal feet, all along here, all along here, along here. It would contain it. Now we have a high point here, so none of this water flows in this direction. We have a low point here, and we have a high point here. You would take that swale, you would multiply it by 1.7, and that would be your volume. Minimum volume. The maximum volume would be more depending if the slopes were 2 to 1 or 1 to 1. What we couldn't
We
predict.
would like to see that the whole point was that, I mean, the board can calculate a volume, but they, go on.
putting that point aside and talking about the rest of it, what we did is we super elevated, or we're proposing to super elevate this, and there were some concerns about that. And again, what I was told and explained to me is you were concerned about the super elevation. We're proposing a 2% slope. Again, let me back up. The normal roadway, by the design standards in the town of Falmouth, would be a 2% slope from the crown of the road. All we're proposing is that same thing, that we use a 2% slope starting from the left side to the right side to direct the water away from the wetlands. Our goal, again, is to keep that surface water runoff away from the sensitive receptors. The same is true when we go to the east, and the same is true when we go to the south. If you refer to the, sheets 2 and 4, and 3 and 4. The design is to slope the road away from the wetlands and let the water that comes from the road stand to the side of the road. In some cases, it will percolate through the soil, depending on the geology, because the other complexity of this is basically what I would describe the backside of a dune habitat. So it's unconsolidated sands. In this particular case, the surface water would percolate or disappear into the sand. In the areas to the east and areas to the south, there's more of a glacial till complex soil. So in that case, the waters would tend to stand on the side of the shoulder of the road longer and either percolate slower or evaporate or some combination thereof. So whatever would apply here wouldn't necessarily apply up here or down here. Again, we identified this particular area as being the most critical because it's used by the entire association, it's wider, and it has a longer boundary of wetland resource areas and the one man-made culvert. Having said that, what we did is we used the design standards for the Massachusetts Unpaved Road BMP manual that's published by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the proposed design of the cross-section taken from page 9 of the guidelines for grading is what we propose to do. We propose to put a crown on the road. We propose to add 2 to 3 inches of new material to correct any faults. We propose to scarify, remove the raveling, remove the rutting, remove the holes, or potholes, that is. That we propose to regrade, as it's stated here, anywhere from every 4 to 5 years. And in the course of doing that, providing 2 or 3 inches of new gravel if need be. We proposed a dense graded crushed stone, and we refer to it as, we've modified it to say a native dense graded crushed stone, again, to try to reduce the impact on the resource areas. Getting back to your question, Jen, I can calculate it and give you a specific number for the quantity that the swales will hold. Or I can give you a range, because again, in some areas, if it's flat by the road, we can keep a 2-to-1 slope. In some areas where it's steeper, we would have to possibly make it 1-to-1. Now what we did is we changed the cross-section so we do not have a 2-foot flat area. The capacity will be a little bit less, and likewise, we're going to have to disturb a little more area with a flatter slope.
Well, I think the board was expecting that information tonight, Jack.
Okay.
We did ask for it at the last hearing. I think
Jack
that
did
was
specify that,
made very clear.
and I
I
inadvertently
understand
didn't
you're
do it.
away,
Okay.
but I mean...
We made all the other changes, and I inadvertently admitted
Because now we're
that.
having a hearing with no information that they asked for the last time.
I believe we've addressed every issue except that issue.
Did we address, did you look at providing an alternate road base?
We considered it. And in
And?
fact, I have some literature here. I downloaded it. And I was also told that you had seen this application on Cuddy Hunk. And so I want to take a minute to talk about that. I've had the opportunity or the privilege of working on
I haven't
that.
seen an application. I said I was told it had been used in that type of application and wanted you to explore that.
Okay, well, I did explore it, and I can tell
Okay.
you from personal experience, there's a vast difference between applying it on an island like Cunninghunk versus using it in West Falmouth, and I'll explain a little bit that now. And I could certainly leave this information for you. I downloaded it today. Basically, Cunninghunk, if you think about it, and I agree, this type of application, and the application Jen's talking about is using a geotextile fabric to help strengthen the road surface so less road maintenance would have to be done within this particular association. I have at least two comments about that. The first is the majority of the wear and tear and the problems occur in the first 1,300 feet. The remaining areas are rather thin, and they're used, that is, the roads are thin, and they're used less frequently because some of the people live over here, some of the people live over here, and some of the uses here never have to pass and repass across those two traveled ways. So I don't see their applications as being applicable here, only because the maintenance of these areas would be less frequently, and if you look at sheets 2, 3, and 4, a majority of those roads don't have a wetlands within at least 50 feet of the actual road. So I don't believe we have the same sensitivity issues as we do in this area as in portions of the first part of Little Neck Bars Road. But having said that, I absolutely agree this application of a geotextile makes sense on Cunninghunk because
How does it not make sense here?
it doesn't make sense here because in order to apply this, if you look at the recommendations this particular company is making, you're going to have to provide a minimum of 6 inches of processed material below the product. You're going to have to provide a wearing surface above the product, and in our estimation, that means you're going to be excavating a minimum of 9 to 10 inches of the existing road to make sure you bring back the processed material that they're requiring, and they're going to require it in order to certify this product, as well as the material above it. Well, in the course of doing that, that means you would have to, if you were doing that to this road, you would have to physically take a minimum of 9 inches of material out, put it somewhere else, because we can't stockpile it in this area, probably take it out as a minimum up to here, then come back with 6 inches of material and put it on here, then put that same fiber, geotextile fiber, and then put a leveling course on it. Having said all that, well, a leveling course, you would have, I would still recommend it be super elevated anyways, away from the wetlands. And you would still have to maintain it. You may not have to maintain it every 3 years, it might be every 5 years, but you would still have to maintain it with some regularity. And in addition to that, you would still be maintaining the swale on the westerly side of the road. You have to maintain it for cleaning, for vegetation removal, and the migration of silts, because you would still have silts that travel across it. I assume from the conversation you had with Jack, I didn't think you were talking about
I was
a
talking about any
concrete.
product.
Excuse me?
I was talking about any product.
Okay.
I asked you to explore
Well-
different products, and next time, Jack, I would really appreciate if you could just put your answer in writing to the board, so I don't have to ask.
I didn't
Thank
have
you.
the time.
I know you
It-
didn't.
It isn't Mr. Resnikoff's fault, it isn't Jack's fault. By the time I came back, we could make the changes to the plan, but some of these issues I could only address when I was here. And some of them were only brought to my attention a little while ago. The point is, I don't think it's an appropriate application because the level of work is quadrupling to do that. And I don't think that's appropriate for this particular area. And I think we would need more room. Right now, we have straw wattles that are only several feet off of the existing road. If we were proposing to do this type of work and stay within that same footprint, a 2-day project becomes a 3.5-week project. And then you also have all the control issues and you have all the cost issues that go with it. So I just don't think it's a good application in this particular area. going back to the swales, again, our goal was not so much retaining a specific amount of surface water runoff, but retaining some runoff so we would not have a direct flow of silts going into the culvert or direct discharge of hydrocarbons coming from vehicles or a direct discharge of animal waste going into the culvert, going down the ditch and into this area. That was our goal.
Okay? Is that the end
Yep.
of your presentation?
Well, that's the end of it. Unless you have questions, I'd be
Well,
happy
we
to
do-
answer them.
I'm
Okay.
I have a question.
I do not, I'm still on oysters and water quality, but I know there are road and stormwater people who have questions.
Madam
But
Chairman.
I also want to make a comment, and that is, we had 3 continued projects tonight. And the requirement, I know we're the waste quality, what is it called?
Water Quality Management
Water
Committee.
quality management is in a learning curve. They're on a learning curve as to how they deal with us. But Jack, you're not. And Mike was the 3rd project, and Mike's project came in. When I came in on Wednesday, I picked up Mike's and I said, where are the other projects? And Jen said, well, we haven't gotten anything yet. And I didn't get yours until Thursday or Friday of last week, Jack. So I'm just throwing that out. I think you.
I understand that.
You happen to have gotten me in a day when I think there are bigger things in the world than dealing with something like this, but it's not fair to engineers who get their projects in on time, to people in town who get their projects in on time, and to everyone on this board who gets their projects, gets their work for the week, and prepares for it.
That's another conversation. I understand that. That's a conversation I have to deal with, and I apologize. I don't know what else to tell you about that.
Well, I'm saying, unless
Jack, you
anybody-
rarely get scolded in front of this board. Rarely.
I know what your expectations are, and there's just something that I can't discuss about
Well,
that tonight. Okay.
yeah, and I don't need to know that. I'm just
Okay.
saying that
I
as a board
apologize.
member and working with board members who have been on for anywhere from almost a year probably to almost 9 years, you know, we put a lot of effort into it.
You do.
And we expect to be treated with the same respect that we try to give the people who come before us.
I
So,
absolutely
you've
understand
got
that.
the
I
message,
absolutely understand that.
and
I
I'm gonna
really
go to
do.
Michelle.
Actually, Madam Chairman, I have one
You
other
have one
question.
question?
One
Ed, I
more
can't go
before
to you,
Michelle
but-
goes. Jack, and this goes to the last hearing they had, did you look at possibly using designs that Commissioner West had described, possibly narrowing the road or doing anything like that? And I'm not talking all the roads, I'm not talking all 3 or 4 of them, but that main one that seems to be the problem area. Looking at alternatives for reducing the speed that causes the damage to that road. And I know she outlined some measures that have worked in the past or alternatives that people use to reduce speeds on gravel roads. And was that discussed with your clients?
Very briefly, it was discussed. Because my answer to that is the condition of the road always slows the traffic down dramatically. There's 2 things about it. Mike McGrath will attest to this. You make a road improvement, all of a sudden you go from one type of problem to another type of problem. The problem could be speed. As a result, the speed causes accidents. So either you have a road that's poorly maintained and people complain about their backs getting wrenched because it's got potholes in it, or you can make it, improve it so that it is so good people drive too fast. And so there's a happy medium everywhere. I don't believe reducing the road width makes sense. And the reason why I say that is a long time ago, someone taught me that a path or a road finds the width it needs to function. That road isn't narrower, isn't wider because
it's wide because there are puddles and people keep trying to avoid those
Avoid
puddles
that-
and driving onto where
That's
there shouldn't be a
part of
road.
it, but the other part
That's why
is,
it's so wide in part of those, and those of
In
you
a
who
couple
have
spots,
drive
I
every
ag-
day know that.
I agree with you, but by the same token, this area was also the area with a lot of two-way traffic flows. And so by that nature, they need it wider. This road is only about 19 feet wide. That's a little bit narrower than the standard paved road, excluding the shoulders, excluding the curb. So
Jack, I live
the
on
way
a-
it's worn,
I live on a dirt road that has their road is a half again more people than my road, and my road is only one car width wide. Jack knows his parents live on it, and if a car
I know that
comes,
road well.
you pull into the side. And her suggestion was have a couple of pullouts. You have to go back and forth, have a couple of pullouts. That was the suggestion. It's a straight, you can see that. You know, you
that
have
is
to leave it a little
that's
wider
reasonable,
than
I
the curve.
suppose. It's reasonable. I guess the point, I really can't answer that question. I think that's more a Bill Resnikoff question. The reason why is now you're asking, how do they want to use the road? I don't think it's inappropriate. I don't think it's too wide. I think based on the size of this road compared to other roads that are used regularly, because there's quite a few inhabitants here. And most of the use of this is in the summertime. So you'll have 3 months of intense use and you'll have 9 months of not so much use.
Well,
It's
I
certainly
wanna
an
argue the
option.
point. I wanna have
It's
questions
certainly
from the
a
audience.
very good point.
Do you want to talk now, or do you want to wait until you hear?
Perhaps I should wait, but I could specifically address something that Steve Doyle proposed.
All right,
And that,
Hitting a wetland.
you have to tell us who you are.
oh, my name is Bill
I know
Resnick.
who you are, but
I think this is dead. My name is Bill Resnikoff, and
it's on.
I live in the Black Beach Harbor Head area, and I've been blessed by being the road manager or commissioner or whatever. What? So
Lucky.
what Steve Doyle, who is the president of the association, mentioned last time is that we have previously in some of the small roads put in speed bumps for the exact purpose that you're talking about. And so that is a non-significant, that is, it's not very deep engineering way of addressing the speed question down here.
And are you thinking of doing that?
If you think that that would be wise, we'll do it.
Well, let's hear the comments on the board.
Okay.
We'll get back to you. I'm just trying to preserve your road
Yeah, I know, and I'm saying
and preserve the environment.
Right, and we're on board with you on both of those.
Okay. Michelle?
Well, one of the main reasons that the project is before us is at NOI. I mean, there are other reasons as well, but stormwater is obviously a part of that. The Massachusetts stormwater standards would qualify this as a redevelopment project. So because there's enough work going on here, stormwater, even though it's an existing surface that is there, stormwater has to be addressed to the maximum extent practical. That is part of the Massachusetts stormwater standards and why, part of the reason why this is in front of us at all. So due to that standard, the applicant is charged with coming before us with something called maximum extent practical for meeting the stormwater standards. Yes, you don't have to meet every single standard to the letter of the law, but there has to be some improvement to the stormwater management along this road. So we need to have the information to review to determine if you've met it to the maximum extent practicable. Now, usually what that means for a stormwater project, I'm lucky to do them almost on a daily basis, so unfortunately far too familiar, is that there's some bounds, okay? Nothing really is done for stormwater out there right now versus what it would be if you treated the water quality volume off this entire road, which is obviously the other end. And then somewhere in the middle is maximum extent practical. And you say why you couldn't do the letter of the law, and why it's an improvement over what is there today. Well, what was provided, and there was a storm redevelopment checklist in the stormwater standards that helps applicants through this process. We were not provided with the redevelopment checklist, and there really wasn't any information in the narrative on sizing. We had the volume per linear foot that you mentioned earlier, but in terms of the normal calculations that are done for stormwater projects, they were not provided. The methodology was not the proper methodology for Massachusetts stormwater standards. We have swales on here. We don't know how much volume we hold. We don't exactly know what the drainage area to each one is, which is one of my questions. Yes, there's high points and low points that are on the plans, but I can't see the topo of the surrounding area, so I don't know if you super elevate it, is it just going to go off to one side, or is it going to flow down along the side of the road and into the swale? I don't know what you were assuming was the contributing drainage area for each swale. I don't know how, then, of that contributing drainage area, how much of the runoff the swale can hold. That information was not provided. I don't know if it's going to be a wet or a dry swale. Groundwater elevations weren't provided. Is this going to be, the super elevation is fine for, well, we talked about that over time it's only 1.5 inches difference for the super elevation, and driving over it with the dense grade is going to adjust it, and so that's something that has to be maintained. But the idea of excess sediment getting into these swales, there was a concern that maybe they're even bigger than they need to be. Are they going to be more of a nuisance versus not even working at all? I mean, we want to be able to evaluate this to know if this is actually going to be an improvement over what is there today, or if it is actually going to be something that is more of a problem than a solution. And I see you've changed the cross section to a V ditch versus the flat bottom ditch, and I think that a V ditch is a little bit harder to maintain, or I guess it will just be altered then once you get in there and scoop out the sediment, then it's not going to be a V ditch.
I need to provide a response. In the problem, I think, I understand everything you said. The message I was getting from the commission, though, is they wanted to see minor modification of wetland resource areas. And this entire environment is some form of wetland resource area. So I said to myself, is the goal of the commission to reduce the alteration of the wetland resource areas, or is the goal to maintain some other standard, i.e. the stormwater runoff? Now, I suppose I could reduce that to a narrative form. So what we did instead, what I did is I made a value decision. What did I think was a more important goal to reach? And the standard I set was minimize that area outside the footprint of the road by putting the smallest detention areas we could. And in fact, I wouldn't have proposed any detention areas except we found a culvert that conveys water. Otherwise, my recommendation would have been to pitch or super elevate the road away from the wetland that borders the standing water. Because I don't think we can do anything else. At a prior discussion, we had discussed that the groundwater is very high in this area, so we wanted to, again, minimize what we thought the alteration of the areas that are undisturbed right now. Now,
Wait a second. What's this prior discussion that you're talking about? This came to us, when did this come to us? The day you weren't here. The day you weren't here. When was that?
That would have been
2 weeks ago? What prior discussion did we have?
2 weeks ago.
We had a prior discussion with you that you had to file an NOI.
well,
I'm not quite done yet. you did not tell us what you were proposing. That's the problem. We don't have the information of what you're proposing in order to weigh the benefits of not disturbing the wetland or disturbing the wetland. But I see a whole stretch of this road here that doesn't have a swale, where there isn't a wetland nearby, versus a portion of the swale that you are proposing that actually looks like, I guess it doesn't quite touch the wetland, but it is proposed in an area really close to one of these identified wetlands. So I can't tell why you chose to put it in one location versus another, and it's hard, like I said, from the topo to see exactly what the contributing drainage area to each one of these swales. I just don't have the information to be able to judge if this is treating anything to the maximum extent practical. And the reason I brought up the width of the road was, if that was one of the reasons that there isn't a swale in some of these locations, is because there wasn't room between the edge of the existing road and the wetland. Well, maybe in certain cases, because the road is quite wide in this area, you could have a swale, and then you could have a bump out for making sure there's wide enough for passing, and then maybe it was just a suggestion. It is not up to us to design the project for you, but we don't, there are a lot of different ways you could do this. We just need the information to be able to make a finding. So that's what I was looking for from the last hearing, and nothing really more was provided except for a change in the cross-section, which I wasn't sure was a change in the better.
Oh, you mean the cross-section of the swale?
Of the swale.
Okay.
The geometry and just maintaining these things over time, just the practicality of doing maintenance on this dirt road that's going to be accumulating in the swale itself. You're going to need to be scooping it out, and a V-ditch doesn't usually work that way. And I would definitely not support a one-to-one side slope unless you're using a hardened surface.
I don't have a problem with that. I guess, though, when you go full cycle and you think about it, in what I've done is I've taken 7 months of conversations we had about this particular project and incorporated them. And perhaps that was a mistake, because we've met on the site twice, not necessarily you personally, but staff and other members. And what we've done is we've drawn inferences from that meeting that suggest a certain protocol to follow. Again, it doesn't meet the exact standards that you were requesting, but what we're doing is we thought we were finding a reasonable middle ground to a problematic project. I have no problem.
Very well may be. I
Okay,
can't tell.
I understand. We can take a step back. I guess I had fear, or I had the understanding, the implied understanding, that we don't want to modify the habitat any more than we have to. That if I'm wrong, please say so. Then we will come back and we'll look at it entirely different. But that was my belief.
There are a lot of sensitive areas here. They
Absolutely.
have a road that they want to maintain the best way possible. They want to be able to have a plan to maintain the road, but there's a protocol when you're reevaluating, redeveloping a road. And Michelle just outlined what this protocol is. You might have had, your design may answer some of these questions, but you haven't given us the information.
Oh, and I just wanted to add one more thing. The discussion of the geo-grid, I'm not sure what you had looked into. You were describing a fabric of sorts.
Well, I use the term fabric. That's
Is it like
inappropriate.
The grid,
It's a grid.
Plastic with the clean
A
gravel
porous,
used so that
honeycombs.
honeycombs,
Yeah.
different types of that. Yeah, I know there are a lot of different products out there. And just to kind of touch on why we talked about that at all, obviously, using dense grade out there is basically impervious, and if you were able to use a clean gravel, that the water could go down into the surface a little bit and then sheet off to the side, then it would help with some of the pre-treatment and not have so much clogging in your swales and whatnot. But just using clean gravel on a road like this, it will get, you won't be able to hold the super elevation if you don't have that geo-web. Like, it would get kicked out and it wouldn't work just by itself. And that's why we led to the whole idea of the geogrid. Granted, it is pretty flat out there. Anyhow, there are different ways to deal with it. We just need to know what you're proposing and how it, to the maximum extent practical, meets the standards.
Okay.
How your reasoning,
Excuse me?
how your reasoning leads
Incorporates
the
in.
maximum extent
These-
possible.
I understand.
dealing with it.
I understand that.
Okay. Mike.
I think it's all been said. I had concerns.
Okay.
I think it's been said. There's no need for saying it twice.
Have many of the same
Yeah,
concerns
exactly.
as did Ed in his letter. Tomas.
Hi, Jack. You say, I just want to be really clear. The whole reason that I've been involved in this project is the maintenance of it. Okay, I left the expertise about the calculations to those who can control that and understand it better than I. Boots on the ground. It's not once a year that this is going to get graded. It's going to be more than that. You're having, in your narrative, less than $5,500 a year for maintenance on this, to be cleaning the swales and that. The whole reason I want this and to function so that the board understands your calculations are right is I use the phrase bulletproof. This notice of intent is going to give the homeowners and the association a palatable mechanical device to maintain that road. But it's not going to be just once a year. I don't want any illusions that the main part of that road is going to get treated a lot because of the traffic that comes in there. Yes, there is summertime traffic. That corner, Jack, right from Chappaquiddick going in, that corner, oil trucks, UPS, FedEx, landscapers with trailers, all that stuff. That's why I want to be clear that the association is going to come in here more than once a year and say, at least in the spring, midsummer, and in the fall, and say, we need to touch up this point. We need to be able to do that. And in order, that's going to happen. You've got container trucks going down there rattling the bejesus out of everything. Just the turning, the oil trucks taking that turn push material. And then you have a storm event. You know, that's the reality of it. That's what I want to deal with, is the reality of it.
I don't have a problem going back to what Michelle said. I'm just telling you the reasoning we used to come up with this
I'm not asking you to
design.
put geo.
Okay.
I don't care about that, to be
Okay,
honest with you.
so
Because
I-
it's impractical in my eyes.
I think Bill could probably tell you right now how often they maintain it in the past without any treatment. How often is it maintained?
Well, in the old days when the town... In the old days when the town maintained it, it depended upon the weather circumstances, but typically it would be done like once early in the spring and then maybe 2 or 3 times before the fall. But if it was a wet year, it would be done more often. If it was a dry year, less often. So, and if the road was properly rolled with dense grade, it probably would be lessen the frequency of grading, a necessity. So I think it's somewhere between his 1 time a year and you're saying maybe 4 or 5 times a year.
You know, that would be a reasonable thing to expect because of the amount of traffic that goes in there. And I just want that reality to be clear. You know, and then controlling the speed is going to be big. You know, that's going to be something that's up to the association. But, you know, as far as the calculations, like I said, that's for others. And you are correct, that, from Chappaquay to that first turnoff on the Little Road, that's the washboard. That's what gets hit with everything but the kitchen sink. So, that's all I got.
Tommy?
No questions.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I'd just like to say something. Jack keeps saying discussions that we had. And yes, the applicants and the representatives have had multiple discussions with the town staff, myself, our engineering department, you and Tom were out there. We've had discussions with DEP. You know, minimize the impact to the wetlands. Yes, that's what we want to see. But I also think that they could minimize the impact to the wetlands by reducing the road width. It's not, you know, there are other opportunities. I am not a civil engineer. I don't design projects. I say these are the concerns we have. We understand the constraints you have. But there are ways, as the commission has pointed out, to look at this road a little bit differently, outside the box on what we're usually, how things are usually looked at in town. And I think they were really good suggestions. And I think the, not the inability, but the desire not to change the width of that road is something the town is really going to have to, and private road associations are going to look at, that's eventually going to have to be done. I mean, status quo is just not working in this area. You know, putting in multiple tons of dense grade in this roadway, you're filing a notice of intent to protect the resource areas, not just because you're getting through a permitting hurdle. And that's how I kind of feel this is right now. It's begrudgingly, we're filing a notice, but we're not doing anything to really try to really look at it and improve it. I know it's a difficult site. I've been, you know, looking at this road for over 4 years now. I know it's a difficult site, but I think the commission had made some good points the last time, and they really should be respected and looked at and considered more than, oh, it'll be too cost effective, or we want to maintain the width of that road. That's all.
Michelle, do you have any more comments?
No.
Jack, would you like to provide us with some more information? Or would you like us to? You would.
What I'd like to do is talk to my client and see what, that is, continue the meeting,
Okay.
Okay.
talk to the client about what they're willing, they've heard what you had to say. Again, I wish I was here 3 weeks ago to hear this, because then today we would have some, if not all the answers that you needed. I regret that. It's water over the dam. Can't do anything about it.
Okay. In
I
the
do
future,
want to make,
though, in the
I do
future, let
want
me
you
give
to
a
know,
little-
I appreciate your time.
Let me give you a little tip. I found out that all of our meetings, you can just click on the conservation website and you can watch us. So should you miss a meeting,
Well,
you can't.
FCTV has our meetings.
I did that. I found it.
I think a week later.
I was hoping to see, for tonight, to see the hearing that we're here for, and I wasn't able to see it.
Oh, well, the one time I
So
looked,
let's-
I could get it.
April 3rd.
you know, I didn't do it.
Okay, let's give
I
a
can't
date.
offer an
Let's give a
explanation.
date.
Jack,
We have
how
time.
long, how
We have
long do
time.
the Jack
We
and
have
Jacks
time.
need?
They would like to get this done in May, right? You'd like to get this done in May. We're halfway through April,
Yeah,
so,
I need a full week.
well,
And
we
so-
need a week too. We would like the stuff a
Okay,
week
so
ahead of time,
that
so
is,
2 weeks.
I need to submit, I need a week so I can submit it on a Wednesday,
Right.
okay?
Madam Chairman, you have
So-
4 continued hearings on May 1st. And 3 new hearings.
I'd like to get this project. There are a few projects in town, there are a few things we've been working on for months that I would like to see get put to bed. And so we can start working on some other projects.
May 1st it is. If Jackie can get us the information by next Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Not one copy on Wednesday and 11 more
I-
on
Believe me, I
Thursday,
don't want to
Friday.
relive that. That's an issue that I had a problem in my office. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Oh, I understand all
Okay, I
about
just-
that, so.
Things happen.
Did we figure out exactly what we need for the next hearing? You want the
We're
storm
working on the
water?
same
Michelle's articulated it very well. I gave an answer to her,
So
what
you'll
she,
have that.
what is. She will have the information she needs so she can advise the rest of the
Now, I hate
board.
to do this, but Michelle, may I ask you to talk to Jack, have a telephone conversation with Jack, so you both are on the same page?
If he would like that, I could do that. It's up to
Okay.
him.
I would, sometimes I found that sometimes when some of the commissioners meet, and just to make it clear, when commissioners meet.
Oh, I don't have a
on
problem with
projects, Let
dialogue.
me just make this clear to people. Commissioners sometimes meet, and Jen sometimes comes, sometimes doesn't. The last time I met with a group of people, Jen had an
Came
emergency
late.
meeting in town, in town hall. Our purpose is not to say we're for or against a project. Our purpose is to look at it and say, this is the kind of information that the commission is going to need to make a decision. And if you say, could we do it this way or that way, and it's something where, when one or the other of us happens to have some expertise, you know, we can say, hey, yeah, that'll work or that won't work. But, so, I appreciate that, Michelle. It's a little extra time and effort, but I think it's better all the way around. So I'm gonna leave Jen to coordinate that. Okay? Thanks. Yes?
I'd like to make a motion for a continuance to May 1st, and I would also like to acknowledge and thank Vera of what you had just said, to put this project to bed. When this started, it started on a stub toe. We've come light years in a very short period of time, relatively, to a solution. So I look forward to a resolution on this.
So we have a motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Do you second it, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Motion and second on the table to continue to May 1st? May 1st? May Day.
Is that the?
Any questions? Any questions in the audience? Okay. Motion and second on the table to continue to May 1st. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack? Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, can you make a statement? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I want to thank the Conservation Commission for its encouragement and patience, and I really appreciate your being willing to do it on an expedited thing on May 1st. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. We all want to see the best. It's a beautiful place out there. We want to protect the wetlands. We want to reduce maintenance for you. So,
Okay. Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, you've been very patient back there. Not so patient that you couldn't resist making a comment on one of the projects, but pretty patient. Raymond and Ann Carlin, 374 Mill Road, Falmouth, for permission to construct and maintain a one-car garage and in addition relocate the gravel driveway utilities, remove an existing shed, reroute or replace the sewer notice, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is the hearing that I was unable to attend, and from the notes the commission provided me on this hearing, you were looking for information regarding the deck and whether it was a legally permitted structure. Other than that, this is a small addition in the velocity zone as well as the garage, and some of the items that the staff had pointed out that the board needed to discuss was whether or not you would allow the garage.
Right,
with the
which we can-
breakaway panel.
Which we will discuss
In deliberation.
Deliberation.
Yep. And Mr. McGrath has provided aerial photos dated 95, 91, 2001, and 2005 to the file that show the deck.
Good evening, Mike.
Right, Mike?
Good evening.
Oh, the quorum is everyone here, Susan.
My client also sent an email with a picture of his wife when they first bought the house. They bought the house in '94.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I forgot to bring the copies, but I did submit that too. So the deck is pre-existing. It's been in existence for at least 22 years that we're aware of. We couldn't clearly see it on the 75 photograph. As far as I can see, this is a permitted activity to construct a garage in a velocity zone. The last time I submitted something in the velocity zone, I reminded the board that the building code, the state law that establishes the building code says the towns can supplement the building code, but I'm not aware that the town has supplemented the building code. Breakaway panels are allowed under the building code, so I think the only way you could ban breakaway panels legally is to supplement the building code. If this was on a barrier, on a beach, I might feel different, but this is a couple hundred feet away.
Mike,
from,
it's the
I
velocity zone.
respectfully disagree with you,
Wait a
Mr.
second.
McGrath.
Mike, it's the velocity zone. We will look at velocity zone regulations.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any further questions? Can we have a
Motion
motion?
to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Thank you. Can we have a second? We have a motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. I cannot be trusted with my Bruins app.
FX Casino LLC 286, this is, we're voting orders of conditions.
Madam Chairman, can we take 190 Grand Ave out of order because I believe we have an
Sure.
audience here for your
Right,
deliberation on that? Correct me if I'm wrong,
Stephen
gentlemen.
and Deborah Reichel, 190 Grand Avenue, Falmouth, and everybody's on the quorum but me.
Everyone but you.
I was going to say, Susan keeps yelling at me about the quorum over here. Everybody but Betsy. Okay, Commission, this is 198 Grand Ave. You had a continuance where you needed some clarification on some information on the FEMA maps. Some additional information was provided to you by the applicants, I'm sorry, the abutters. Information is provided by the abutters regarding their concerns about the dune, the beach, the impact of the proposed structure on these resource areas. I don't believe that BSS provided a revised plan decreasing the size of the structure. I think they just addressed some of the information and questions that were asked at the original hearing, but correct me if I'm wrong. You received the architecturals on the project that Commissioner Byrd had asked for, as well as a landscape plan. Understanding the concerns of the residents in the area, the project does meet all of the Commission's setbacks as they are currently outlined in your regulations if you accept how the dune is delineated, which is at the end of that lawn area and has been, that lawn has been maintained for a number of years. So those are, you need to discuss the dune delineation if the proposed structure is going to interfere with the lateral migration of the dune, the landward migration of the dune.
Okay, folks,
I'm sorry, did you say who's on the forum?
everybody but me.
I'm on that?
Are you on it?
Hang on. I was just listening to
You
Betsy.
might have been.
I don't think
Day
I was there the
gone, too.
first.
You might not have been the first time, Michelle. Let me
I don't
double
think so.
check. No, you were not.
Okay.
All
I
right,
mistakenly looked at
I'll
your
jump
name
right
instead
into
of
it. So
Cody.
the,
Tommy, Ed, Mike, and Tom.
gentlemen, it's up to you.
Well, I'll jump right into it. I am accepting the dune delineation as it is. I am not inclined to do otherwise.
Okay.
I am also very empathetic to the neighbors and how it affects them. But this is in a regulatory stance, a permittable project. And from where I'm sitting, think of it otherwise than a regulatory pass, that it meets a performance standard that is in front of me. It's just what is going to happen. I made a comment at the first hearing that redevelopment of this project would happen because it is a regulatory and performance standard that are being met. It is, however, one that is vastly different than most immediately around it. They're being affected with it. Any redevelopment with this would affect somebody somewhere. And the migration of the dune, it's going to happen whether this house is there or the old house is there. But as, like I said, the delineation, I am accepting this engineer's delineation of the dune.
Okay.
And as contentious as this is and heartbreaking for some, I see this as a project that is doable.
Ed, Mike, Tommy?
I keep looking at this and wondering if I'm missing something, but I haven't found it.
So and it's a permittable project. Whether, I'm just gonna make a comment because I had to deal with sort of backlash from another project month and a half ago. Whether you like this is not what we're doing here when we're on this side of the table. When we're on this side of the table, we look to see what was proposed, we look to see what the regulations are, and then we make our decision. Mike?
From the perspective of our regulations, it's an improvement. It may not feel that way from architecturally or traffic-wise or otherwise, but from our regulations, it's an improvement. So I'm, in that respect, very comfortable with it.
Tommy, any comments?
No, I believe it meets performance standards, and I have no special conditions or comments.
Yeah, any special conditions? They were covered in the proposal?
I don't think there's any special conditions from the first hearing that I remember the board discussing, or it would be special conditions beyond the
Normal
special conditions you guys have, which is the lawn area,
Yeah, I mean, there are no
maintaining the
particular
vegetation.
issues that
There's
were-
no particular issues unique to this
Okay,
proposed project.
okay.
The engineering department, I know, did submit, and it's in the record, some information on the curb cut, because I did ask BSS Design to have them look at that.
Right.
So that was submitted. That was going to be a special condition that they would need the engineering department's approval for the particular curb cut that they were proposing, but that information was provided to the staff, and they're put in your record by the town engineering department.
Okay. Okay,
Motion to accept the notice of intent as discussed.
Second?
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you, gentlemen.
Do you want to just go right up the
Sure.
8 where we're on?
Sure. Silvestro Calabrese, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth.
Oh. Don't apologize, Susan.
We all remember what this is.
Oh, yes.
This is sand to either side of the,
Tommy, Mike,
platforms.
Betsy, Michelle, Ed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, wait, who am I missing? Tom Corva.
Tom's missing on this. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
He recused himself.
Yeah, he recused himself. Sand placed on between the two revetments at 8 Wigwam,
Right, and
as
that's-
well as the beach nourishment area to the
100 cubic yards to the north.
north. Thank you.
And that has special conditions that come with natural heritage.
Okay.
And we also have special conditions that any of the sand that goes on that site has to be approved.
Okay, so natural heritage
Compatible with
letter
what's
was
there.
submitted at the
Well,
last hearing?
compatible, but also the other sand to either side has to be pre-approved. In other words, we want to know what the source of any of the sand that's
Right.
put out there.
Okay,
And
sand
it may
source
be-
identified.
May be that it's a source that they have and it may not be. It depends on what they come back with.
Right.
Okay, you're gonna have your standard planting specs for American beach grass.
Yep.
Did you discuss putting, some sort of biodegradable jute netting on the sand over the revetment area?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and does the board want to allow the 100 cubic yards of sand to the north?
I'm comfortable with that.
We had previously not allowed that, correct?
Yes. You had previously not allowed it.
Then the difference with this,
The difference with this is that there's been more erosion in that area since. I mean,
So does that mean we put more sand on, or are we more concerned if you put sand
More
there, where it's
relief.
gonna wind up?
well, it's going to wind up downstream from there, but it's not.
Maybe in the marsh.
Possibly.
Well, eventually, as sea level rises, there's going to be more sediment in the marsh. In order for the marsh to exist, it has
Well,
to have a
marsh-
source of sediment, so.
The
it
marsh
may-
will be a bay.
Or if there's a source of sediment, for a while, the marsh plants can keep up. Well, personally, I could live with 100 cubic yards of sand there.
Under this, they did submit their letter from Natural Heritage?
Yeah,
Okay, so Natural Heritage will have very strict conditions on the placement of sand when the slope, to account for the endangered species in that area.
right,
Yes.
and they did. Mike read
Yep.
it. The other special condition is that they have to post signs that there's Chapter 91
Madam
allows.
Chairman, I informed the property manager when I went out there to originally discuss this project with him,
And what did he say?
that he should have the signs up prior to the commission's hearing. Apparently that was not done. I will ask one more time.
Well,
How
I'll tell you
about
what,
until
no
they
signs
can put their signs up, we can
before-
check them, and then they can do their beach nourishment.
Yeah. All right?
It's a pretty sight, I'll go back up.
Yeah. We all like that site.
But
we
the
can have a
board has asked
board trip out to it.
multiple times for those signs to be installed.
Yeah, maybe they'll serve oysters.
Over
No.
multiple
In fact,
projects on
no
this
sand
site.
can be placed on that site
Until the signs are.
until the signs are.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, post signs or no sand.
the access for the 100 cubic yards to the north, they're coming off the riprap for that, bringing that sand in, right? Okay, because that was one of our, in the previous project.
Well,
It
I
was
mean,
gonna-
unless
they
you
were gonna-
discussed,
Path.
They were gonna do a path through the through the dunes.
Right, that
Yeah,
was
and we
one of
didn't
the
like that, and
reasons
they
we
were
didn't
gonna
like
put, yeah. So you want the sand to be placed from the access that
Yep.
they use for that,
Which I think is what they said,
Yeah,
right?
they
yeah,
said that.
okay.
Yeah.
That was,
The understanding,
That would-
okay, so
that
that
would-
makes it, I mean, that's part of the difference,
how
That's
they're gonna
fine.
get by the house, is
yeah, I don't,
their business.
right. And there's
Okay.
there's not eel grass out there, right?
What was that?
There's not eel grass out,
It's not.
yeah,
Well,
okay.
eelgrass also can accommodate a small amount of
Right,
sand. I mean, that also grows up as sand moves back and forth.
Make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second?
Any further, oh, you can't say anything. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Now, FX Casino LLC, 286 Grand Avenue,
Same.
Falmouth.
Oh, wait, except Tom's on this one.
Okay.
Hold up. Tom, Mike, Betsy, Michelle, Ed, no Tawny.
No comment.
No, that can't be right.
All right.
Only because, Tommy, I remember you specifically asking them for a letter from the beach department.
Yes.
yeah.
That must have been, we didn't.
Mike, I
have-
think this is your
We
handwriting.
mustn't have had our reliable secretary here.
Had a bad day. I don't know.
Tommy, you're back on the quorum. I'm like looking at that going, wait a minute, that's not right. FX
Relax,
Casino was the beach.
Wet Linguini, and then, we'll call it even.
It's a beach nourishment and maintenance project. We had asked, staff had specifically asked, and again, the hearing, the continued hearing was when staff wasn't there, but I've reviewed the notes the board has provided. I did provide you notes to guide you through that hearing, what the staff was looking for. We didn't want them to damage the little dune. We wanted them to clean out the little dune. And I spoke with the applicant's engineer afterwards, and they said they're going to be bringing the sand and the equipment in through the garage
Right.
area now.
Right.
So that allows for them to bring the material in without having to get Board of Selectmen, not just Beach Committee approval, but Board of
Right.
Selectmen approval to use town
Right,
property
This is a lot
as,
more, this is a lot cleaner.
it's much cleaner for them.
It's all in-house.
Yeah.
Did they provide the letter that the beach committee would be doing the maintenance work? That letter the beach committee can supply, there was two parts to the town on that one. One, the original project, or what the board originally discussed, is possibly having them use the beach committee, Bruce McGarter, the assistant beach superintendent, doing the grading work for them while they graded and did the maintenance work on the Heights Beach. And then the second was accessing from their construction access to apply the sand. That would have been a different approval process.
Right, that's been
Yeah.
cut out.
So,
And you did ask, right, about that this is, the town does not do this for free, it's a fee. It's a
that
real
is something
fee.
they need to discuss with the beach committee
Right,
and the
I
beach
mean-
department.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah, we can't
that
sit there
came
and
up.
say, you need to.
I don't know
yeah.
whether you were at this hearing.
I was not at the
Yes,
continued
but I'm
hearing.
just saying,
Yeah.
it did come up.
Oh,
We
good.
did-
Yes,
We did discuss
there
it,
is a
and
fee.
yes, there is a fee.
That's fine.
Yeah.
There were two things I had written down.
Okay.
In addition, removal of metal posts along the property line. that,
Okay, remove the metal post, got it.
And the spoils that were piled there, if it's just beach spoils, Betsy wanted them incorporated in part of the dune versus removed.
Okay.
There
The
was-
only
assuming
concern,
they're
well,
not
the only
trapped.
concern about that is that, they should be doing that now, and they're taking all those spoils and they're just dumping them on the dune. They're not really incorporating them into the
No, it has
Towa
to be
dune.
incorporated in.
They're not, they're using it, it's just,
So no more future that,
Yeah.
but use what's there, versus
Incorporate.
removing
Yeah,
it.
so the,
Okay.
so the, right, the finding is that there was a pile of
Yeah.
stuff that was just picked up, and the
So they can't
special
continue to
condition is
dump it there.
they
Yep.
can't continue to do that. They
Yep.
have to incorporate it in getting,
But the pile
Yeah.
that's there that had various stuff can be taken as
Yeah.
trash.
okay,
Right, beautiful, okay.
thank you.
Sin no more.
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
motion and second on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed? There's one opposed.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes, 1 nay.
Okay.
And
I'm confused.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
I had one eye, no opposed.
You're gonna
And
oppose.
what particularly did you like about this one project? You're like, no, I want to stay.
We'll talk some other time. I don't want to talk about it right here.
I'm having so
Oh,
much
okay.
fun that the
I wasn't sure if I had missed something, that's why I was
Well,
asking, I'm sorry.
I did express some,
I may
Problems
not
with
have remembered it the last hearing.